So welcome everybody. I know not everybody is in a classroom, but whether you are live from a classroom or you are at home, I just want to thank everybody for taking time, for paying attention. I am so crazy impressed by every student who is dealing with remote learning, hybrid learning, whatever you're going through. It is a lot and it's a tough way to learn sometimes, so I just really appreciate it and want everybody to know that before we even get started. I have been living in Zoom meetings, so my own version of remote learning, so we're getting very comfortable with this. My name is Janet. This session is Hydroponic Growing 101. So we're definitely going to talk about hydroponics. We're going to talk about what they are, how they function, how Growing Places uses them. But I'm going to be honest, that's not really the only thing I want you to get out of it. If it were up to me, there would be sort of a bottom line for you that has a little bit to do with hydroponics, but mostly to do with this idea of food justice. So that's where I'd like to start. I want to talk about what food justice even is. So first question for everybody. When I say the word justice to you, what does it mean? What's a good synonym for just? If I say that justice has been done or the situation is really just, what does that even mean? If you've got a synonym, if you have a word or a definition, send it Alex's way. What do we mean when we say that something is just?
So right now, I'm seeing fairness, freedom, good being done.
Yep.
Good.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm going to highlight any responses that said fair. And really, it's all of what you're talking about, right? Fairness, some freedom is worked into that when things are fair. Usually there's a lot of opportunity, and that's a good thing, right? Good is being done. So fair is a great synonym for justice. So when we're talking about food justice, what we're really talking about is fair food. Now, what the heck does that mean, right? What does it mean for your food to be fair? Think about the world that we live in. If food is fair, everybody has what they need, right? So food justice is when everybody in our community has the food that they need. That can mean a lot of different things, and we're going to talk a lot more about it, but just keep that concept in mind. Food justice is really important, and it's related to this idea of hydroponic growing. That's our second concept that we want to talk about. So what is hydroponic growing? When you think about what plants need to grow, I'm going to list 4 things, and I want you to tell me which ones plants need in order to grow. So first one is sunshine, light. Do plants need it?
We've got yeses.
Consensus is yes?
Yes,
Yeah.
It does.
We absolutely need light in order for plants to grow. If you have no light, if you plant your garden underneath a tree and it gets full shade, it's going to have a much harder time growing. Do we need, let's see, we need light. Do we need water? Is water absolutely essential?
Lots of yeses.
Yeah, these are the easy ones, by the way, so I'm glad we're getting these right. Last one is, do we need soil? Do plants need soil to grow? And I know the title of this is Hydroponic Growing, so you might have an idea on this one too, but we're going to talk about why. And if your answer is no, we don't need soil, why not?
So I'm seeing not exactly, but it helps. Not always, depends on what you're growing, and fertilizer sometimes.
So that note about fertilizer is really important because what your plants are really getting from the soil is nutrition. They are stretching out their roots and they are taking in all of the vitamins and nutrients that they need the same way we do when we eat food, right? Same thing, but they're getting it through their root systems in the soil. If you don't have soil, your plants can still grow, I don't know if anybody has ever put a flower or, you know, a little cutting from outside in a jar of water and then noticed that it formed roots right inside the jar. Plants can grow in water, but if there are no nutrients, which you can find in fertilizers, your plant isn't going to be able to grow very far. So after a certain point, it's going to get stunted and it won't grow. So you definitely need light. You definitely need your plants to have some kind of nutrition provided for them, and you need water for them. Hydroponic growing is when you put that whole root system right in the water. The roots actually get submerged in water, but it's not just water. Usually you've added some nutrients to the water solution. So they get everything they need right in one little package. Lights are overhead, your plants are in the water, and the nutrition is in the water itself. At Growing Places, we're doing kind of a subset of hydroponic growing that's called aeroponic growing. And aeroponic growing is what it sounds like. You're not growing just in water, you're growing with plants hanging in the air. And I'm going to show you a video in a little bit, and you'll be able to see just what that looks like. But instead of the root system being underwater, it's hanging on the tower, and water is sort of raining over the roots while it's hanging there. It uses a lot less water, and it's a lot more environmentally friendly. So that's what we do at Growing Places in our tower farm. So coming back around to this again, you know, the reason that I wanted to talk to everybody today is because I know you guys are in school. I know you have a lot of stuff going on. I know it's COVID. But the truth is there's a lot that you guys can do right now to help with food justice. There's a lot you can do to help make food fairer for everybody in our community, and you can do it by working with Growing Places. So I wanted to come and talk to you about the tower farm so you could see that part of our work, but also tell you about some of the other things that we do and how you could come and join us. So I'd like to share a video with you. Please be kind. It was my first video. I haven't had a lot of experience doing videos, so be nice. Don't laugh too hard. It's about 15 minutes long, and we're gonna watch. And then if you have questions while you're watching it, pop those in the Whova chat and we'll answer them as we go. So yeah, so after the video, if we have other questions, we'll go through it because the video is gonna tell you a little bit more about the tower farm that we have at Growing Places, how it works, how it's all set up, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty detail. So let me share my screen. Bear with me one moment. All right, here goes. Hi, I'm Janet Edwards. I'm the Director of Programs and Operations at Growing Places. So a couple of years ago, we wanted to start growing food indoors in the winter season. We got really excited because we have this awesome basement space at the Doyle Conservation Center in Leominster. It's right next door to our offices. You would never even know it was here unless you came by at night and saw the purple lights from the tower farm. We're growing food every day, every month, all year. In our region, we have a lot of what are called food deserts. Food deserts are areas where fresh food isn't easy to get. It might not be available in any form for quite a distance from your home. If you don't have a car, if you don't have transportation, public transportation, it can be even harder to get fresh food. Our job is trying to help make sure that everybody, whether you have a car, don't have a car, whether there's a bus near you or not, you can get to the fresh food that you need to have. So Growing Places uses a lot of different strategies to get food to people. We have farmers markets. We have a mobile market that comes right to people's homes and to places where people already are. We have a tower farm, which you can see right behind me. And we have community gardens that we work in as well. So we have been working with food pantries and other food assistance sites for a number of years now. And one of the things that we started to notice was that the donations of food that they get, most of the time, are packaged foods. They might be really high in sodium, they might be really high in sugar, and they don't usually have a lot of fresh produce. Produce is really hard for a food pantry to store. They don't always have refrigeration. Sometimes it can be heavy. When it goes bad, it's hard to dispose of the waste in a way that is environmentally friendly. So growing places exists in part, the reason that we're even around is to help even that playing field. You know, it's really important to us that everyone has access to the same kind of food too, in order to be equitable, in order to be really fair for everybody. It can't just be that everybody gets some kind of food. Making sure that everybody's belly is full is not enough. Everybody should get the same quality of food. Everyone deserves that. So we try to make sure that the best food that's available in our region, the food that's coming from our local farmers, the food that's fresh and really, really beautiful, that's going to everybody. It's available to someone to buy at a farmer's market, but it's also available in a produce donation bag that goes out to someone who's been identified as really needing it. So one of the things that I learned at Growing Places when I started working in our gardens was that food waste is one of the things that I have control over when it comes to climate change. It's one of the things that each individual person can make a really big difference with. Your food waste, when it goes into the trash, not into a compost, but right into the trash, doesn't really go away. It just goes to a landfill. And when your food goes to a landfill, what it's really doing is contributing to greenhouse gases. So by limiting the amount of food waste, one, by using your produce quickly and in time so it doesn't go bad, but also by making sure that you put it back into a compost, for example, you are keeping it out of landfills and reducing the amount of greenhouse gas. Americans on average are wasting almost half of the food that they purchase and bring into their homes. It's a crazy statistic. I feel good about having the opportunity to do something on a small scale that has a really big impact on a global scale. Growing Places works with a lot of partners. We're a pretty small organization. And I'm just gonna pause for 1 sec and just ask about reactions so far. So you're watching this video. You can see this giant tower farm down in our basement, which is just like 100 yards away from me, just across the way. And in this video, I'm talking about the idea that it's not enough for everybody to get food, that folks should get the same quality of food. How do people feel about it? I'm just curious about reactions. We hear a lot from our community. As long as people are getting some kind of food, that's fine. If it's just sugary cereals and snacks and macaroni and cheese in a box, it's fine. It's enough. At least it's food. At least somebody's belly isn't empty. I'm making this argument that it's really important that everybody has really good food, really quality food. Does anybody have any thoughts, any reactions to that? Do we feel like that makes sense, or does it seem like it's enough? You know, is it okay as long as people have something, they're all right? Any thoughts, any reactions?
We have some, let's see. There's okay, but not okay. I think it's really good. Everyone should be able to stay healthy rather than getting diseases that could have been avoided.
Yep.
Yes and no. I think we should all have the enough food and quality food.
Yeah. Right. And it's not easy, right? Because you don't want anybody to be hungry. You want everybody to have something. And it's really important that everybody has something. So better to have something than nothing. But in terms of that being enough, like really okay, we can probably do better. So Growing Places is around to try to make that happen. You know, that's part of the reason that we exist as an organization, is to try to make sure that people really do have the food they need to be healthy. Because if you don't have good food, it's definitely going to affect your health, and not just your physical health. You know, it'll make you stronger, it'll make you live longer and be healthier, but it also affects your mental health too. I mean, if you skip breakfast, you might end up being pretty crabby before lunch. And if you're feeling kind of crabby, it's harder to pay attention in school. And if you can't pay attention in school, you're missing out. And if you're missing out, you're gonna feel that later on in life, right? So it all kind of snowballs. But if you got a good breakfast, if you got to school feeling pretty good because your belly's full, it gave you the energy you needed, and then you can pay attention, you can learn, you can do what you need to, you go off into the world really well prepared. So Growing Places is trying to make sure that everybody, not just kids, but their parents too, have what they need so that they can be healthy and lead the life that they want to lead, not just the life you have to lead. So the piece that I'm talking about in this video next, and I'm going to go back to it, is this idea of all the different ways that you can get involved. So here, going back to, oh yeah, fun fact, we grew 15,612 pounds of produce last year, which is a crazy amount of food. The year before, we only donated 800 pounds. So in 1 year, because of the pandemic, we went from giving our community 800 pounds of food to 15,612 pounds of produce. We've been busy during the pandemic and we need help. All right, here we go.
We only have 6 staff.
Yeah.
So in order to make all of this work happen, we work with partners like hospitals, we work with community partners like senior centers, and we're always really excited to work with schools. We work with youth volunteers all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They get to do everything we get to do in whatever way works for them.
Oh, terrible pause point. Okay, so I just wanted to highlight, I don't know how folks feel. When I was in high school, I had a community service requirement. And before I actually did community service, before I volunteered anywhere, I thought volunteering meant I was going to do grunt work. I thought it meant that if I showed up somewhere, they were going to give me all the jobs that nobody else wanted to do because I was the volunteer, not the paid staff person. And I think it's really important that everybody knows that that's not how it is at Growing Places. So at Growing Places, we have tons of volunteers and very few staff. So we love our volunteers, and every single person who comes to our organization has skills, has gifts and talents, things that they're really good at, and stuff that they're really interested in. So we always try to find something that's a match for both what you like to do and what you're good at doing. And it really doesn't matter how old you are. If you are 11 years old, there are things that you can do that help us. If you are 75 years old, there are things that you can do that help us. Age really doesn't matter. So just a plug to say that, you know, the fact that you are between 11 years old and 17 years old doesn't mean that you can't volunteer with us. And it doesn't mean that if you come and volunteer, we're going to make you just do the tasks that nobody else wants to do. We won't just make you weed everything in the garden.
We had a student ask how they can volunteer.
Yeah, so there's a few different ways, and I think I'm going to say this in the video too, so just bear with the repetition later. But you can do a couple things. One, you can talk to your teacher and let your teacher know that you're really interested in volunteering with Growing Places. It could be that your school connects with Growing Places and we work together to figure out some kind of project that we do as a group. If you're interested in volunteering solo, you can reach out to us directly. So you can either call our offices or you can email us. I know we have a booth here for this event, and there's information there with how you can reach us. But you can also go to our website, which is just growingplaces.org, O-R-G at the end, and you can reach out that way because we are always looking for more folks. We're going to need people to help us with this tower garden. All right.
So I've been working all year with Derek Alford, who is a Territorial Service member with Growing Places. And Derek has been working on maintaining our tower farm for us.
I'm Derek Alford. I'm one of the Territorial Service members, and I operate the tower farm. So typically what I'll do when I get ready to plant, I'll take the seeds and we'll put about 2 or 3 seeds per rock wool cube. And then we have our rock wool here and our propagation trays all numbered. And basically I'll just put about 2 or 3 seeds in the rock wool in the propagation tray. And what will happen is as soon as they get wet, the seed will start to germinate, and with the light on it, and they'll start to grow. So after about 2 weeks, as you can see the first true leaves here, once they get to about that height is when they'll be ready to transfer over to the towers.
So I just want to pause and tell you what this green stuff is that you're looking at, because I think it's pretty cool. Derek, who is my colleague, is telling you that this is rock wool, wool like the fabric. And what it really is 2 kinds of rock, chalk and basalt, both of which you can find in nature. We've taken them, we have put them in an environment together, and we superheat them. And what happens is they basically melt and they get spun like cotton candy, right? If you've seen a cotton candy machine, it gets those really fine little threads. And then once it's in that shape with the little tiny threads, we can press it into whatever shape we want it to be. And that's what we grow in for the hydroponic growing. So Derek is putting these tiny little seeds into the indentation, and this rock wool is really good at holding on to just the right amount of moisture. There's room in the rock wool for tiny little roots to find space and take hold and hold on to something. But there's also a lot of space in the rock wool for water to just hang out and keep those baby seeds nice and moist. If you're growing outside, one of the disadvantages, don't get me wrong, I do love growing outside, but the disadvantage is that you have no control over the weather. You don't know if it's going to be hot and dry, cold and rainy, and sometimes the weather isn't perfect for your seeds. Sometimes the seeds dry out and then they die. In this setup, that never happens. It's perfect conditions 100% of the time. The seeds stay nice and moist and they stay nice and warm.
Once they're ready to be transferred over to the towers, we'll take our rock wool and then we'll just pop it right in our towers. And this is our red boar kale. So for these towers, they don't have stoppers. So if I were to just put the rock wool in, it would just fall straight through. So we have to have these stoppers here. Whereas our microgreens tower has stoppers in it. So once I place it in the towers, we don't really have to do too much with it. It'll stay in there at minimum 2 weeks, depending on what it is. The lettuce and the kale typically takes the least amount of time to grow. But if we were growing something like leeks or cabbage, it might take a little bit longer. Once we place them in the towers, how this whole system works is these lights will turn on, the LED lights, and then we have the pumping systems in each of the towers that are on 30-minute timers. And essentially there's a central tube, what I would call it, and the pump, it sucks up the water, and then the shower cap, the water collects up here, and then it drains through and it will hit the roots. So these plants here, this is a winter boar kale. That's typically what it will look like when it's ready to harvest. So to show you how we harvest, basically what we do is we'll take it out here and then we harvest it. When we harvest, we do the date and we track the weight of the produce and how many bags we are harvesting. So
that's part of how we get that lovely number of how much produce we're donating. Derek every week is going in and with volunteers harvesting all of this produce, and then they weigh it up. This is the kind of thing that we have youth volunteers helping with. It's pretty fun. You get to plant seeds, you get to transplant them, you get to harvest them and put them in packaging to be included in our other programming. And you could see in that video how the water was sort of cascading down over the little root systems. You know, they're not sitting right in water, but water is sort of traveling right down the center of those tubes and keeping everything nice and moist.
We harvest, I take it over to our warehouse for our CSA bags. We try to mix it up a little bit, but we try to get as much spinach, lettuce, and kale as we possibly can because that's what people like the most in their CSA bags.
We grow a lot of interesting stuff at growing places, and because we're working with local farmers, sometimes they're growing really interesting stuff. They have bok choy, they have radicchio, they have things that before I worked with growing places, I probably never even heard about it. When we're giving that out to folks, it's really important that they know what to do with it. So one of the things that's important for us is that we're also providing education. Growing Places tries to provide recipe cards, we provide videos, sometimes we're working with partners. In fact, that's an opportunity for a lot of our youth volunteers to help us do demonstrations and videos where people cook the food that we give out. Even really, really common produce, things you see at your supermarket, if you're not used to cooking with it and you're not used to eating it, you might not have a lot of ideas for what to do when it comes to your house. The work that we do at Growing Places really revolves around the food system as a whole, and it's not just gardening. You know, gardening is where our organization started, but we really work at all stages. And the work that we do prepares people for a lot of different careers that are related to food as a whole. We have a lot of work that we do that is about coordinating all of the food that's coming in and all of the food that's going back out. Those sort of organizational skills are things that people could use in really any profession. But for us, that's one of the starting places. We do grow food, and we have a lot of in-house expertise on how to grow food. So we have a lot of volunteers who come to us because they're passionate about horticulture, and maybe they have careers in horticulture outside of Growing Places. There's also a lot of work to be done that involves working with our local representation. So it's what we call policy work. There are laws that dictate how our food system works. Some of those laws are great and really helpful and keep people safe. And some of those laws, they're outdated, or they had unintended consequences, and we're discovering that they're not so helpful. Instead, they are barriers to getting things done. And then Growing Places work really started in gardening, but that was partly because it's so good for mental health. We were always really excited to share with people that gardening can just make you happier. You know, gardening is a retreat. It's a place that you can go to set aside all of the worries from the day and de-stress. You can get your hands in the dirt and actually feel better. There's a lot of different avenues for professional growth in what we do.
I think one of the big reasons why I love working here is the community engagement part of it. Getting to interact with not just the people who I work with, but the community members through some of the collaboratives we have, some of the Zooms that we go on, the community farms we have, the food pantries, getting to drop off items to the food pantries or senior centers, and getting to talk with local community members, learn from them is something that I very much cherished while I've been here.
So when I think back to high school, I had a lot of classes that I did.
Before we go back to my high school experience, I just want to point out, you saw a couple seconds ago, there we go. That's our mobile market. This is where some of the food that we grow in the Tower Farm ends up. So we want to make food something that people can get regardless of what they have for a financial situation. If you can buy food outright, that's great. You can buy it right at our mobile market. If you have food stamps, they call it SNAP now, SNAP benefits, that help you, you can use your SNAP benefits and your HIP benefits at our mobile market. If you can't afford to pay for your food at all, our mobile market is a place where you can still go and get a bag of produce. This is another place where if you're interested in volunteering, there's opportunity. We would love to have some youth volunteers with us, especially if you're interested in learning about entrepreneurship, what it's like to sell to the community. We have a lot of different ways that you can sort of plug into our mobile market, whether you are growing some food with us that goes on the mobile market, helping us load up and unload when we're done, or being there with us during the market itself. So those are opportunities too, just because I don't think I say that in this video.
We also have about 10 minutes
Back
left.
to high school.
Oh, sorry.
We have about 10 minutes left.
Yes, thanks.
I had a lot of classes that I didn't love. I had a lot of classes that were not the things that I was great at. My English class was great. My math class was not my favorite. But now that I'm working at Growing Places, there are a lot of things that I learned when I was in high school that I'm finding I actually use on a regular basis. With gardening, I'm kind of shocked on a regular basis by how often I'm using my basic math skills. I have to calculate things like the amount of compost that I need to cover a 22 by 13 and a half square foot space. When I think about what I learned about refining my ideas, that process of refining my thoughts is something that I use all the time now when I need to write about the work that I do and request funding for the work that we do. You know, and certainly in all of my science classes, everything that I learned about the scientific method is something that I apply on a regular basis now.
I'm just gonna pause and zip us ahead briefly. This is just the part where I tell you that the scientific method is what we use every day.
As part of a science class and as in many different contexts. It's so important to sign up for if you're eligible. We are looking for students to come with us to some of our local farms and become farm hands and learn about the process from the farmer's point of view. We are open to any student's passion. If it has to do with our food system, we can find a way for you to help.
I would say my biggest advice for the younger generation, particularly high school kids, is don't feel like you need to rush things. Especially now, there's a rush to kind of have your life together by the time you're 21, 22, and well, it's okay to not have that. It's okay to kind of explore throughout college, throughout high school, and even beyond to figure out what you're really interested in.
Food is the great connector. Food is the thing that brings all of us together, and it's a really powerful thing. A lot happens around a kitchen table. People break bread, and that's a famous phrase for a reason. You know, it brings peace, it brings relationships, it brings love. It's how you show people that you care. When food isn't equitable in our community, we're leaving people out. If you're interested in volunteering at growing places, there are a lot of different ways to get involved. You know, one, you can talk to a teacher and let them know that you're interested. It can even be a group volunteer project for you in your class. If you're interested in volunteering on your own, you can always reach out to us directly. You can email us, you can call our offices, you can visit our website and learn more about what we do.
Right. And that's the end of our video. So just checking in, Alex, did we have any questions while we were watching, either about Tower Farms or growing places?
We have had a bunch of questions, actually, so if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's take some time for Q&A.
All right, let's see. So in the beginning, we had a question about using a lamp as sunlight. Would that work?
So if it's just a regular old bulb, not quite. Plants need a few different kinds of light. When you're out in sun, you're exposed to UVA and UVB rays, right? That's how you get a sunburn. If you are inside and you're just sitting under a lamp, you're not going to get a sunburn. Our plants need those different kinds of light that would give you the sunburn. So there are special lights that you can buy called grow lights, and you can get really inexpensive ones for like $10 from probably the internet, probably on like an Amazon, although I'm not supporting Amazon. But you could probably find an inexpensive one at a garden center, or you can buy crazy fancy ones like the ones that we have for our tower farm that they use in greenhouses and places like that, that are LED and have a bunch of different little kinds of bulbs. Some of them are purple, some of them are blue light, some of them are white light. And then it gives your plants that full spectrum of light, because different kinds of light prompt your plant to do different things. Some of them prompt them to produce fruit, some of them prompt them to grow. They each do something a little bit different.
So a few students have asked about carnivorous plants. So they asked, can you do this kind of thing with carnivorous plants?
Maybe. I've never tried to grow like a Venus flytrap. The only thing that I would say is that all of this stuff is happening indoors. So unless you have enough flies and bugs and other things flying around in your home, I wouldn't think your plants would be very happy. They're probably going to need a few more flies than you have. But I think their root system would probably be happy. Like the plant would grow, but it wouldn't get enough bugs.
All right, another question. Because there is less space needed for vertical farms, does that mean you can produce an equal amount of crops with less space than an average farm with the same amount of space?
Yeah, 3 times as much actually. So the tower garden that we're using uses, like, I want to say it's think it's the same. I think it's 3 times less water and grows 3 times more produce. The real reason is because when you think about growing stuff outside, like I said before, conditions are never perfect 100% of the time. You get cold days, you get hot days, you get rainy days, you get dry days. It's never perfect for your plants. In a tower farm like what we have in our basement, it's perfect all the time. There's just enough light, there's just enough warmth. You know, we control the temperature in that room. So your plants in that kind of environment can grow the biggest and best that they possibly can. So you're always going to get more than you would if you were growing in an environment outside that's more varied.
Alrighty. Another student asked, do you need special soil or can you use some from outside?
Yeah, if you're growing outside, your soil that you have in your backyard is probably pretty decent, but it's always a good idea to do a soil test and see if you need something additional, because all of our plants like to have a certain set of what we call macronutrients and micronutrients. It's just like when you take a multivitamin in the morning, you know, same thing. We need certain things to grow, our plants need certain things to grow. In our tower farm, in the hydroponic setup, there's no soil at all. There's that little rock wool cube, and that's it. That's what your plant grows in. And then the water comes over the top of it, and that is all it needs. It doesn't need any dirt whatsoever.
Alrighty. Another question. What is the temperature in the rooms and how do you maintain it?
Yeah, so it's a basement, and it's just like in your home. There's a thermostat. You can either turn the heat up, turn the heat down, and change it if you need to. We keep it somewhere in the upper 60s, right where people are comfortable. It's also pretty much where plants like to be comfortable. We try to not have it go too high because just like people, plants get a little unhappy once it's too hot, they get cranky. And if it were too cold, and by too cold, I mean probably like less than 50, then the plants again would not be super happy because we're growing some things out there that are a little sensitive. Some of our lettuce greens, they wouldn't be happy if it was down in the 50s. But because it's a building, that never happens. If it got that cold, then we'd be uncomfortable as people too. So we keep it right in that sweet spot, upper 60s.
A lot of students, I hope you get to see the chat after this, have been talking about their own gardens that they're growing in their family's gardens. One student asked, do you have any tips on growing a garden outside?
Yeah, too many for the 3 minutes that we have left. But if you're starting a garden, if it's your first one, or if you've been growing for a while, but it hasn't been going well, my big tip is start small. Just do a little bit, because a lot of times what happens is we look at a seed catalog or we go to the store and we see so many things that we can grow and we buy them all and we plant them all, and gardens take a lot of work. So it's easier, and chances are you're going to have a lot more success, a lot more luck if you're only growing a few things. So like pick the few things that you and your family really like to eat, the things that you're going to enjoy and that you'll be the most excited about, and plant those. If it's not something that you already eat, maybe don't plant it this year. Wait till you get a couple of good seasons under your belt and then start thinking about expanding. So start small and successful. And in the sun, don't plant under a tree. I mentioned because people tell me that that's their issue all the time. They're like, I don't understand why it's not growing. I'm like, it's under a shade tree. That'll do it.
I think we have a couple minutes left. One student said, I found a rot spot on my tree. Should I be worried? It has grubs in it.
I know nothing about trees. I am not an arborist. My guess is that's not a good sign.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, wait, another one came in. Please, if I missed any of yours, they might have just gotten lost at the top. So if you want to ask again, if I missed you. Another question is, why don't we see more vertical farms if they are more efficient than the standard farm?
They still take a lot of maintenance. You know, they are more efficient and we are seeing more of them. But the other reason is that there's a lot of expense upfront. They're expensive to set up. You know, if you have land, if you have access to land, starting up a farm outside really requires you having access to water and access to seeds. To start up something like this right off the bat, you have to buy the whole tower farm and it's very expensive. Each one of those towers costs about $1,200, and we had 20 of them in that space. So it's a pretty expensive little setup. I think that's a big part of why we're not seeing more, because people need startup funding to get them going. We apply for a grant. If you don't know about grants, it's a way that you can ask for money for the work that you're going to do that's going to benefit your whole community. So we asked for grant funding and we got it. And that's how we got the money to be able to do this. So I know we're up for time, but I hope we see some of you. I hope I get to meet some of you in person. I hope you come volunteer at Growing Places, because we would love to have some more youth involved in this tower farm.
Thank you so much to Growing Places for talking to us a little bit more. And we appreciate it. And hopefully you get some new volunteers.
Yeah, thank you so much. Nice to see everybody. Have a great rest of the day.